Hey guys, what's going on? So following the recent international games as well as the future planned international games, I wanted to look at the specific destinations for where these would be or where they have been at as being the likely contenders for new teams to be developed under the NFL's expansion plans. And while we likely will get new locations that aren't on the map yet, that could definitely come into this as well. I think these are good spots to start at in terms of brainstorming what this could look like, especially at a global level. So starting with the places that there have already been international NFL games, I think really where it all started and where there's been the most games and even the most planned going forward is in England, specifically London, England. I think likely England could be one of the first expansion teams, if not the first international team for the NFL if we do ever get to that point. And while soccer really is the dominant sport there, and there probably isn't as much NFL hype there as it may seem, it's definitely a big enough market, so I think a team there would be a really good place to start. And in terms of specific names, I think there's a few different general options that you could run with, or you could maybe do variations. I think obviously something like the Knights, or you could even go Monarchs. So I definitely think you have a great potential there for a really unique team name and design, as well as a unique location. And then also following this year, we had the opening weekend, which was the second game of the season between the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles, and that was in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So I definitely think that would be another great spot to add a team. And in terms of specific names, I think you really could get creative with the international ones, and I really think that would make for a unique uniform design and whatnot. Just really thinking from a general sense, just maybe going back to animals, you could do something with the pythons, or you also have toucans being really big there, so I think they would be a neat mascot and potential team logo. And then going back a few years, you also have Mexico City being a popular spot for a lot of the international games. The last one being in 2022, I believe, and then you have several years prior to that. So I definitely think Mexico would be one of the greatest potential spots to add a team in there as well. I think just in terms of what's unique to Mexico, obviously something with either the Aztecs or the Mayans would make for a really neat team, or even going back to animals a little bit more, something like the iguanas I think would be really neat. So I think a team in Mexico would definitely generate a lot of buzz. And then looking more into what's planned in the future, this is mostly looking at certain spots that are being scouted out for the 2025 international games, starting with Dublin, Ireland. I think would be another great addition for Europe. And you already kind of have a few other teams doing similar stuff with the Ireland theme. You have the Boston Celtics for one, or you have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So I don't think you want to do anything too similar to either of those. So I think something instead, such as the Shamrocks or maybe the Emeralds, could be really neat for the area, and I'd be excited to see what something like that would look like. And then also in Europe, you have Madrid, Spain being another seeked upon location for an international game. And I definitely think Spain is big enough to garner a lot of attention. I think maybe something like the Serpents might be really neat. Or I think something in Spanish, of course, would be really fitting. And for any of these countries, I think something in their native language. And then you also have Australia being where there is also a pretty big market for the NFL. So that's also another place they're looking to get out to. So I think something like in Sydney, Australia, being one of the most populated areas there would be a good potential spot for a stadium and a team. And I think obviously something with kangaroos, you already have that with their rugby team, for instance. Maybe if you do a specific kangaroo or something like that, that could come off really neat. But I also think something like the Sharks or the Magpies would be really neat there as well. And then also going beyond the plans for 2025, just looking more into the future, there's also Paris, France being one of the talked about places for just an international game to start. And I definitely think Paris would be a really neat place to have an NFL stadium and team. Looking at their spirit animal, or more of Paris's or France's mascot, you obviously have the rooster. So something with that could definitely be an interesting team. You also have foxes being known to that area. So I think either of those would be great, and nothing kind of like that has already been done in terms of the team names that we have currently in the NFL. And then also you have a lot of games there in the past, or different exhibitions and stuff like that. Nothing too much planned in terms of international, but I think just since it's so close by, I think you also have to really consider Canada for an international team as well. And I think in terms of just having something a little bit more unique, you could maybe do something with the Huskies. That was one of the original considerations for the Toronto Raptors. And then you also have the Grizzlies being unique to Canada. That's also a different NBA name. So I think also something fitting to the area could be the Toronto Beavers. You do have the Oregon State Beavers, but I don't think that's too much of a problem. You do have a lot of overlap between colleges and other professional teams. So I think something in that ballpark would definitely be a good fit. And in terms of these locations, when we're looking through a traveling lens, I think the ones that would immediately make the most sense would be the ones that are closest to the United States already. So that would be Mexico City, Mexico, as well as Toronto, Canada. Those would be the spots to target first, because they definitely could fit into a division. If you just added 5 teams, it wouldn't be that much of an issue. But when we're going all the way to Sydney, Australia to play the game and back, or the team there having to come to the US constantly to play games, I think that would just be a whole lot of traveling. And maybe that's something more off into the more distant future. And in terms of Europe, I definitely think that's probably going to be one of the first places they would go with, because you already are getting international games there so much. But there's several spots, even beyond what I mentioned here. You could also do Italy. You could also do other places in the UK. You also have Germany being one of the potential places where they're looking to do international games. So I think eventually you could have Europe being its own division within the NFL, and they do a lot of their games there, so you don't have as many long trips back to the US and back. But I definitely think you have a lot of good options to start with here. And you have a ton of different countries that are looking to expand, even such as South Korea, Nigeria, Japan, Colombia, Argentina. So I think it's definitely possible we get to the point where we have teams really all over the world. So feel free to let me know if you guys have any ideas. Really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you later.